Good afternoon. Thank you and welcome to our March End service. Today we have the pleasure of having Heather Smith, who's with ARC, and she's the clinical coordinator, and she's here to discuss the views of forensic interview. Without any further ado, Heather Smith.
Well, thanks for coming. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. So I don't know if you know what the Assessment and Resource does, ARC for short, we call it, but we are a Children's Advocacy Center of Richland County, and there are children advocacy centers all over the state. They are accredited under a national body, which is the National Children's Alliance out of Washington, D.C. And what children's advocacy centers do, they're kind of a one-stop place for children to come when there is allegations of abuse or neglect that need to be investigated by law enforcement or the Department of Social Services. So once a child makes a report that someone's abusing them, usually either the police are called or the Department of Social Services are called by people that are mandated reporters in the community, like teachers, doctors, parents, that may call the police or law enforcement or DSS. And then typically when it's children that are younger than, we see children from the ages of 3 up until 18, but law enforcement and DSS will call the ARC to do what we call forensic interviewing. And forensic interviewing is very specific. We video record the interviews. It's so that other people can look at them later in court, if it goes to court. And it's not like therapy. It's usually a one-time interview that we do just to do a fact-finding interview about alleged abuse. So typically the child has already told someone about it, and then we get the referral from, like I said, the police or DSS, and they come in, and we're trained specifically in a technique that's recognized around the country. It's an interview protocol called RATAC. RATAC stands for the stages in the interview, and the stages are rapport building. And that's where we ask the child about family, friends, school, just to kind of warm them up and get them relaxed and make them comfortable with us. Then we do an anatomical identification section where we have them label their names for all body parts, including the private parts. Then we do a touch inquiry, and this is just kind of a way to get the conversation headed towards touches. Because, abuse typically involves a touch, either physical abuse or sexual abuse. So we typically ask about hugs, kisses, and tickles, normal touches, and then we ask about touches that aren't okay, hits, spankings, and whippings, and then private part touches. And then if a child does disclose abuse, then we will follow up and ask a whole bunch of detailed questions about what happened, when it happened, how it happened, where it happened. We have to get everything for law enforcement that they need to do their investigation and DSS. So if a child says, yes, I've been touched in a not okay way, then we follow up with lots of detailed questions about it. So that's the A in the RATAC is abuse scenario. So that's where we're just asking all different questions about abuse and neglect. Then the C is the final letter in the acronym is for closure, and that's where we really just want to kind of end the interview on a positive note, thank the child for coming, and kind of give them a strategy of what to do if this ever happens in the future, self-protection. So we don't want it to happen again. So what to do, it's okay to tell, please don't let someone do that, that's not okay. So that's the protocol that we use, and it's been, like I said, nationally recognized in courts around the country. And, it's important to have a protocol because a forensic interview, like I said earlier, is very specific to fact-finding about abuse and has to kind of hold up in court. And if you go into an interview and just kind of ask a whole bunch of questions like, that are leading or suggestive, that's not going to hold up in court. So we have to be very sure that we're not suggesting material to the child. We can't lead them and say, someone touched you, didn't they? Think questions like that. We can't ask those. Even if we suspect or someone has given a very, a very clear report of abuse from, even if they have marks on their body. We can't go in and say, I know you've been touched. Who did it? Tell me what happened. We have to be very careful that we're not kind of putting words into the child's mouth, and try to let the child tell us what happened to them in their own words. It's very important. So, like I said, it's not like counseling. We only typically see these children one time. We may see them back for a second interview if there's something else we didn't know about, or a child discloses more to somebody else, like a therapist. We may have them come back and do a follow up, but it's typically one time. That's kind of the major kind of service that we offer at the ARC is our forensic services. That's probably the biggest thing we do. And part of that is we do forensic medical exams. We have a doctor on staff named Dr. Susan Lieberoff. You may have heard of her. She's been around for years, over 20 years in the community. And she does forensic medical exams for the ARC that then, if there are signs of abuse, then she's able to interpret and give her opinion about how she thinks it happened. So she can even see kids younger than 3, because sometimes she gets shaken baby or broken bones and marks that she can interpret on an infant even, where a child doesn't need to be verbal for a medical exam to happen. So that's just another service that's part of the whole forensic kind of package that we submit to law enforcement and DSS. We also offer therapy services at the ARC, follow-up after forensic. If a child discloses abuse, we may decide to go ahead and see the child for therapy there. Typically a child has to have disclosed some type of abuse. If we can't see them at the ARC and a child has disclosed abuse, we will send them somewhere else. So we make sure that we provide therapy, somewhere for children that have said that they've been abused. We want to make that very clear. Now, in terms of the guardian ad litem's role in this whole process, we don't take referrals from guardians, because typically, like, if a child were to disclose to a guardian ad litem, what would be your first thing that you did? If a child said, someone's hurt me or touched me.
Tell my supervisor.
You'd tell your supervisor, and then your supervisor would make a report, DSS or law enforcement. So it's real important that, because guardian ad litems are mandated reporters. So if a child tells you about abuse, then you have to report it. So we don't get referrals through the guardians. We get them through law enforcement or social services. But we can, can provide guardians is consultation. So let's say a child says something to you and you're not quite sure what that means, or you're a little unsure. You can call us anytime and talk with us about something that you've heard or something that you saw that concerns you, and we can consult with you about what to do next. We're available for that, and we consult with lots of different people in the community, guardians, teachers, mental health therapists. So don't hesitate to call us if you need us. Sure, question.
Is there ever concern about a lay person contaminating an interview forensically by asking questions of a child? Or
yes.
What would be your professional position?
Yeah. So, like I was saying earlier, a forensic interview cannot be leading or suggestive questions involved in that. And so when a child tells someone about abuse, the last thing you would want to do is impact or what we call contaminate what the child's trying to say. So if someone who is not trained to specifically forensic interview children, oftentimes they'll ask questions that are leading or suggestive, and then a child, especially young children under 6, can get confused. Then sometimes they can think they have been abused.
I know that's right.
Right? You might have had that experience, but so then they might think something's happened that really hasn't. So it's really important that, and we always train on this, because one of our missions is that we train people in the community, guardians, as I'm here today, and then other people, but is that, you know, just do minimal facts interviewing. If, you know, and what that is basically is who did something, what did they do, and just write down what the child says and where did it happen. And then you have enough information to make a report to DSS or law enforcement. So really it's just who, what, where. That's it. You don't need to go any further. You don't need to know if it were a sexual touch. You don't need to know any details about the sexual touch. You don't need to know about if the clothes were off or on. You don't need to know if someone said something to them. You don't need to know any of that. Just make the report, and then a forensic interview can be done, and that keeps it clean, and that keeps it in the child's own words, and then on video again, like I told you earlier, and then it can go into court, and hopefully, if needed, if you know if abuse has happened, it can, you know, justice can be served at that point. That's a good question. And so, so in terms of consultation, feel free to call the ARC. If you have any questions about a case or family that you're working with. We do offer training as part of our mission. So, you know, another thing is, you know, sometimes we will put on trainings for people in the community, and so you may, you know, be invited to participate in that.
How would one go about participating in that training? If
we offer training, we would send you info about it and send you out a flyer.
That'd be like individual guardian could say, well, I can attend the next ARC available training for this, and you have to send them out.
We would send it to you, yeah, and let you know. Because there are, unfortunately, with budget cuts, that's becoming less and less, and we're having to kind of narrow down what we do. We just don't have time, and we're doing more work than, obviously, we did, you know, even a couple of years ago with a narrower staff. But we would let you know if that was available. Hopefully, in the future we can do that. The other thing that I think the ARC is very unique in is that we offer what we call a multidisciplinary team of child abuse investigations, and that's where we ask people to come to the table as a team regarding a case, a child, a family. The guardians are invited to that piece. So the multidisciplinary team could be the law enforcement investigator, the forensic interviewer at the ARC, the doctor at the ARC, the DSS investigator, law enforcement. It could be a mental health therapist, and it could be a guardian ad litem, because we would want to know your impressions, and we would want to know if there's any information that we didn't have that we might need to know about a family or a child. And then there also is our attorneys, the Department of Social Service attorneys, the solicitor's office, if there's a criminal case, come to the table. And so there's just everyone there so that we're making a team decision about where to go with this case. And I think guardians play a role in that, because you might have information about a family. What if the child is being pressured to recant what they've already told? Or what if the alleged perpetrator is around the child? Guardian ad litems could know that info and could give that to the team, and then the child could be protected better. So I do think guardians have a role at that, and we will invite you. If we know there's a guardian ad litem, we will invite you to the team meeting if there's information that we need to know about. So that's just a role you could play. Also, we don't allow guardian ad litems to actual witness the interview while it's happening, but later on you are welcome to come and look at the video taped interview and get a copy of the report, so that you can, with your court order, with your family court order that says you're the guardian and have access to information, you can get a copy of that. We would just need you to request it and send us the court order. So,
in a situation we didn't have physical evidence, say in a child, physical, say, sexual molestation, how important is that forensic interview to substantiate sexual abuse?
Oftentimes it's the only evidence. I mean, 99% of medical exams and sexual abuse are normal. And our doctor does a great job of training people on that matter, and also training juries and judges that the majority of these exams are normal. Sexual abuse doesn't happen in a violent way. Sexual abuse is usually intrafamilial, so it's someone the child trusts and knows, and so it's not a trauma. It's not a violent act. It's typically over a period of time convincing the child to let you do something. So the child's statement is really all that we may have, and it's really the only thing law enforcement has to go into the home or wherever it took place and find evidence there. So without the forensic interview, oftentimes there would be no evidence.
Okay. A lot of times the statement I hear that ARC uses is more likely than not something took place.
Mm-hmm.
That's solely, what is the criteria for that type of assessment, that more likely than not?
You have to be really careful how you give your opinion in these things, because in most cases the children still have to testify in court, so they're not allowed. We can't. Hearsay laws are very particular, so we can't go into court and just say, well, this is what the child told me, so I know it happened. We would never say that. What we can do is look at I've interviewed 3,000 to 5,000 children. I don't even know, I've lost count at this point, but I can look at similar cases where I've interviewed children, and I know what I'm looking for in terms of, are they able to give certain details, a certain sequence of account of events that gives it a ring of truth, and I can go into a court and give my opinion about that. It's more about how the child's saying what they're saying than it is about it more likely than not happen, because I wasn't there, and no one else typically is there when these things happen. There's not witnesses, so it really comes down to the child's statement and then my professional opinion about how the child told me, typically.
Okay. And in your opinion, how successful is that forensic interview in substantiating sexual abuse cases?
Well, when you think about before child advocacy centers existed, typically law enforcement or DSS would do their interviews themselves, not on video. But now, with a forensic interview, a judge can see it, a jury can see it, a guardian ad litem can see it. It just makes it, you judge, what we tell people is, here, let me give you the knowledge to kind of make your own opinion about this as a judge. And that's what we do when we go to court, is these are the things I'm telling you make it seem important to me to kind of believe what the child's saying, but ultimately it's a judge's decision. But we can educate, and then they can see for themselves what the child said. So, without forensic interviewing, I'm sure a lot of children went back into abusive homes.
Mm-hmm.
Many times. I do have some brochures here for you that I'll give you, that you can take with you. It's got our information on it, and if you guys want to and James might want a copy, if James Washington might want extra copy. The only thing I do need to tell you is the address on the front has changed. So that's not our mailing address anymore. It's we are still at the William S. Hall Psychiatric. We're on the state hospital campus still at William S. Hall.
Thank you.
It's 1800 Colonial Drive now. They've just changed it. It's more of a physical address now, because we often get served with subpoenas and things like that. So they have to serve us and show up. So it's 1800 Colonial Drive, the Wilson Building, if you needed to contact us. Now, anybody have other questions? Or
how substantially different is a sexual abuse interview versus a physical abuse interview?
Part of the protocol where we do the abuse scenario portion, and I was talking about the protocol, the RATAC protocol, we gear it towards, with sexual abuse, if a child discloses that, then we're going to ask a lot about sexual touches. We're going to ask, with sexual abuse, you definitely need to know whether penetration occurred, because that changes the law. If it's not penetration, then the charges are different.
Right.
So law enforcement has to know that. With physical abuse, it's more about marks. It's more about what did it, whether was there pain involved, where on your body did it happen, and then just how it happened. So the questions are similar. It's just you have to kind of gear them towards the type of abuse the child's disclosing. So you always go where the child goes.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about a classic case of, say, submersion burns, where a 3-month-old child had second-degree burns, and parent says, well, I filled the tub up, I put the child in the water, went to answer the phone, came back, and there's no classic splashing mark or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have all the classic ring. Obviously, you can't interview
A
a
3-month-old,
3-month-old,
no.
but and I understand that the information is, as long as the explanation is consistent with the injury, then
For the
that's
doctor,
plausible,
right.
So does your use the same standards?
I mean, exactly. If the injury makes sense, if a child has marks on their body and they're telling us this is how it happened, and then the doctor can confirm that. That's why a team approach is so important. Because if the doctor says, yeah, that the way the child told you it happened makes sense to me. It looks like that's how it happened.
Right.
Then that's just like corroboration along the road. So.
An older child who's very verbal, who had the same presentation of a 3rd-degree burn, we all understand that from the time you start burning, you're going to get out of the water. So a parent telling you, I left the child in the water and the child stayed there, is not.
I know that's right.
Right. It doesn't hold
They
together.
held them in there.
Because a child's not going to stay in there unless they're held
No,
down.
they're not
Right.
staying there.
That's right. Any other questions? I can't think of anything else that you might need to know.
Ladies, any more questions for Ms. Smith? So Heather, again, we want to thank you so
Oh,
very
you're
much.
so
We
welcome.
appreciate the information. It was very insightful, very illuminating for our volunteers. I think it's something that we need to make that leap in terms of getting involved in the forensic side.
Right.
Although a lot of our lay volunteers are not forensic interviewers, we all proclaim to be, so
Mhm.
we rely on expertise of professionals like yourself. But I think you guys are the trailblazers that assist us in helping make our decisions. too.
Thank
So,
you. I mean, I think that kind of the go-away message is don't interview a child if they tell you about abuse. Let the professionals do it. But, listen to children. When they tell you something, it means something, and follow up. And I can give you my phone number here if that would help. It's the ARC is 8. It's on the front of your brochure, but the people watching elsewhere might not have it. It's 803-898-1470, and you can call if you have any questions about child abuse or court investigations, family court issues. Please call us and we can consult with you. We do the statewide training for law enforcement and DSS with the RATAC protocol. So we are in collaboration with the Children's Law Office, the state trainers for that. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has anywhere in the state.
One last question. Say, how soon would it be, I guess, appropriate for a volunteer to start discussing sexual abuse activity with a child after the case came in? Granted, our volunteers need to have some kind of insight without trying to contaminate a forensic interview. We need to know what actually happened in the case also.
Well,
is it safe for us to even explore that subject?
When children come into foster care,
Mhm.
they have a mental health evaluation through Columbia Area Mental Health here, but it's
Right.
different places in the state. Usually the community mental health center in the area, and they have a medical exam.
Correct.
So at that mental health assessment, which is what they call it for DSS, for foster care, children are always asked about trauma and sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect. They do a kind of just a broad question about that. So if anything is suspected at that time, then typically a report's made. I would never go out and just ask a child
Right.
blindly, have you been sexually abused? There's
Right.
no reason to do that. And if you have a suspicion of it, call the ARC and let us kind of walk you through what are you seeing that's making you suspicious, what's normal sexual development versus abnormal sexual activity. Because even little 3-year-olds masturbate. I mean, it's just, we know this is part of normal sexual development, and a lot of times, it might shock adults that don't know that. but we can help you with that. We'll consult with you about what you're seeing and whether it's normal or not.
So because you see a 3-year-old displaying the type of behavior, that's not actually indicative of somebody being exposed to it.
It's more likely just normal,
Okay.
normal sexual development. And we can help you with that. We can walk you through what you're seeing and explain the normal versus abnormal.
I guess more importantly, I guess I'm kind of trying to determine for a volunteer who's working with a child, female, 6, 7, 8 years old, who's been sexually traumatized or been substantiated, how safe is it for us to try to interview that same child regarding this incident when we already know that there was some type of allegation of sexual abuse? Do we do more harm? Do we do more damage?
You do more. The more interviews that happen, the more harm you do.
Okay.
Children can change their stories. Children feel pressured if a lot of people are asking them questions like, I'm not saying the right thing, so maybe I need to say something else, something different. We're trained when we do our forensic interviews on video to have a conversation with children about truth telling, how important it is for us to get the right idea, these kind of things. So, and before they even get to the ARC, they've had to talk to either a teacher or a mental health person or DSS. They have to do a 24-hour question. They have to do their own interview within 24 hours. That's just mandated by law. So they've already talked, or if the police are called, they've talked to the deputy that shows up, the responding officer. So they've already had to talk to a lot of people. I wouldn't ask any questions at all. Leave it up to a forensic interviewer, someone that's trained to do it. And after you get a report or after you know something's happened, I don't think it's important to ask any further. I mean, just make sure they're getting therapy. Make sure they're getting the treatment component after that. And just make sure they're safe. Safety is the ultimate. Protection and safety.
Heather Smith, we thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Perfect.